Welcome to our podcast, Doing It Right. This podcast reveals authentic stories from successful leaders doing it right. It's about their journey to become a leader, their choices, motivations, and lessons. In essence, how they built successful personal brands. Your host is Valerie Sokolowski, author of 8 leadership books and nationally known as an authority on executive presence and personal branding. Let's get started. Here's Valerie.
Well, hello. I don't know if you're like me, but when you've gone to large conferences, big meetings, different parts of the country, I've always been really curious about what goes on behind the scenes. Sometimes I've seen some funny things happen that are glitches, and then I've been at conferences where everything just seems to melt like butter. Well, today I am so thrilled to have on the show with me the CEO of a global organization in 40 countries. This is going to be McCoy Zimenoff talking to me, and she runs all of these kinds of programs. Here's what I want you to know about Marie. I met her, I spoke at one of her conferences, and from the time I met her, Marie, you have been so calm. So welcome on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Valerie. I'm excited to be here and really honored that you are having me on your show, and it's so good to see you, even if it's virtually.
Thank you. And you're in Salt Lake City, so what's the weather up there today?
It's been warm here, which is great. They call it false spring, where we know we're going to have some more winter, but it's been a nice break to get outside and get some sunshine.
Oh, that's good. Well, 2 words come to mind when I wrote this kind of ideas about what I wanted to talk about, and the 2 words are resourcefulness and resilience. And that comes from our discussion. We always, as my listeners know, I always talk to the guest ahead of time. And Marie, I'd love for you to share with us how you got into doing these large conferences where you need resilience and resourcefulness. So tell us a story about how you became CEO of this organization.
Well, I guess you could say that I've always been in the right place at the wrong time, where I was voluntold into leadership of doing some of these things. So it started in the Colorado Career Development Association. Actually, I was their president. Voluntold to do that by someone said, you'd be great at this. And so I did, and they ran conferences, and I got a little bit of a feel for it. I was a helper, I was in charge, I was the MC, but we had a team that ran the conference itself. And then my local Rotary Club said, Marie, would you be interested in helping us run some of these events? But then probably the biggest one was I was president of a national association, and we had a conference in Chicago, and one of their rooms flooded. So I chose the location without being able to visit it. I had a colleague that went and visited it, and it was just a little bit on the small side. It wasn't that big of a deal. But then they had some rains, and we were downtown Chicago, and a third of the room had to be closed off because it flooded. So now you have 100 and some people shoved into the space that was supposed to be for 70 or 75 people. And it was really uncomfortable, but it was what we did, and it was what we had. So we just went with it. And you learn as you do these events that you just have to go with it. And if you make too big of a deal of things going wrong, it just makes it more wrong, more frustrating, more apparent to everyone, versus being able to kind of roll with it, figure out what to do next, and move on. And Valerie, I think we were talking about the story where I also used to teach classes at the local workforce center. And I was making coffee for one of the classes, and I chose that day to wear a white skirt. Why? I don't know. I was making coffee, and the coffee spilled onto my white shirt about 5 minutes before class was supposed to start. So I went into the restroom, got a paper towel wet, wiped the coffee off of my skirt, flipped my skirt around so that the coffee stain was in the back, and taught the class, because what else were you going to do when people were there and needing help with their resumes? They didn't care about the coffee on my skirt.
Oh Marie, I am so visualizing that. I don't think I would have had the state of mind to turn the skirt around. I probably would have just doused myself and apologized. But how creative, talk about resourcefulness. That's pretty cool.
You do what you got to do, especially I think when you realize as an event person, it's not about you, right? It's about the people that are there and how can you help them have the best experience possible.
You know, I love that. Thank you for telling me it's about them. Don't we sometimes in our chaotic situations just go into, I do anyway, like, oh my gosh, this is going to look bad. I'm going to look bad. What's going to happen, you know? And so just your mindset. Did you just always have that calmness, or is that a learned skill? Can we learn that?
I think you can learn it maybe just by putting yourself in situations over and over again where you have to deal with it. I don't know. My mom was a third grade teacher, and I don't, if you've ever had an educator in your life, you know that they really don't get sick time or, even if they are sick, they have to go in and plan the lesson for that day for the substitute to do. And so there was that in elementary school. My mom was a teacher, so, maybe she was a little bit more accessible. But in middle school and high school, it wasn't like I could call my mom if I forgot something. She was teaching class and she couldn't bring it to me. And a lot of people grow up in that situation. But I think that was part of it, was that it wasn't, I couldn't be bailed out. I couldn't go home and get things. My house was quite a bit outside of town, away from school. So I think it started then that you just have to deal with what you have and go with it, and make the best of what you have.
Well, you certainly have made the best, it sounds like, throughout all of your career of running large organizations. So for those people who haven't had an educator, and I'm one in my life, if you were coaching, because I know you do that, if you were coaching someone and trying to help them stay calm in difficult situations, what kinds of things would you help them with? What would you say?
Well, I think, as you noted earlier, to really look at the bigger picture and to have that opportunity to laugh at it. So I get this opportunity a lot lately because I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and they're always doing something that maybe you would prefer they don't do. And you can make a big deal out of it, and you've got to choose, is this something that I'm going to make a big deal out of, or am I just going to laugh and not worry about it? And you have to know what is important to make the event go and to make people comfortable, and what isn't as important, and you can let that go or turn it into something that builds community. And people really want to help, which is something that I'm still working on, making that a place where people can help and I don't have to feel like I'm doing it all by myself. And sometimes when we get stressed out, we can isolate and think, oh, I need to do this. I need to have all the answers. And especially when we're in stress, looking to those people that can help us. And in what way might them helping us actually build our relationship or build that community?
I love that. And isn't it true, when someone asks me for help, if they say, Valerie, I could use help on, there's something, Marie, about just the word help that, isn't it true, that kind of just takes you back, and of course I'll help you. There's that, of course I'll help you kind of a moment that goes through at least my mind. So again, people who don't or haven't yet learned to ask for help, how would you advise them to learn to do that?
I'm working on planning ahead for the help so that it's not something I have to do when I'm stressed out. Because when I'm stressed out, again, everyone usually tends to isolate, and it becomes more challenging to ask for help. So planning ahead to ask for help. This isn't something I'd recommend to everyone, but when we ran actually my first Career Thought Leaders Conference was in Denver, and I happened to be 7 months pregnant when we held the event, and I was trying on dresses before I packed, and I said, oh, this one makes me look pregnant. And my husband just started laughing, and he's like, yes, you are. And maybe it's a good thing if you look pregnant, because people will offer to help you because you have trouble asking for that.
That's very good of your husband to kind of put it in reality. You can't hide that, Marie.
Yes, yes.
When you talk about some of these good advices that you've just given, I would love for you to share with us your background, your strength of character, and where all of these values have come from. Tell us a little bit about that before I get back into career thought leaders. What was it like growing up?
Yeah, it's one of those things that you don't think about that much until you start to realize people's differences and, of course, pluses and minuses from our backgrounds. I grew up, my mom is fifth generation Swedish, and we were very deep in her family. We hung out with her family a lot, and her father was actually a farmer in western Iowa. And you saw the resilience, right? And the resourcefulness that you had to do things with what you had. They lived probably 20 miles outside of the closest town, which was about, 3 or 4,000 people. So that piece of it started from very early in my life, and obviously even before my life, of the resilience, the resourcefulness. And then the Swedish background and the way that it presented itself, at least in our family of origin, was very calm, very collected. You didn't share your emotions very much, but you also were there to support people in a very calm and collected way. And there's, great benefits to that, the calm that comes, the ability to kind of step in and help people without getting too emotionally involved. I was a lifeguard early in life, so that was helpful during that period of my life as well. The places that I've had to work on is to be a little bit more vulnerable, to share my emotions, and to realize that there is great value in doing that as well, and that I can balance the two. I can tell my story, share a little bit about myself, which in that family of origin wasn't necessarily something that people would do, and I can bring that calm and resourcefulness when I need it. So trying to build where I have the best of both worlds, both through that learned behavior and then the emotional piece that I can add in by learning now. And isn't that the great thing about all of us, is that we can take the good and then change to be the things that we want to add to our toolbox so that we can be even better in the work that we do.
Well, isn't that the truth? The day that we become perfect, I don't know where we'll be. I won't even, I'll be under the ground and I will have missed it totally. But
Yeah.
thanks for being vulnerable on that. And I think that's a really good point. Tell us about Career Thought Leaders. It's a big organization, 40 countries. So how did you become CEO of the organization, and what is it?
It's one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about continuing to run in-person events in this day of virtual networking, is that I met Louise Kurzmark, who used to own Career Thought Leaders with Wendy Enelo, at a conference. She was teaching a class and I was in that class. And then I stayed in connection with them and saw them at other conferences, built a relationship, had them as a partner in some of the organizations that I was a part of. And so when they were looking to move on, Wendy actually called me and said, Marie, would you be interested in purchasing Career Thought Leaders and Resume Writing Academy? It's a business that grew out of Career Masters Alliance, started in the early 90s or maybe even in the late 80s, depending on where you see that start. And then really evolved. They've always had in-person events and started doing some virtual things early on. And now we do a lot virtually, obviously, with those 40 countries. Many of those are virtual, although the conference that you spoke at was in Madrid, Spain. So we are international presence on the ground as well. We have board members in Europe as well. So trying to get into the world of career development, career management, leadership management, and build the skills of the people in that line of work so that they can better help their clients and be prepared to prepare their clients for what work will look like tomorrow.
So, okay, Marie, so your sweet spot, if people are listening, I'm hearing you say it's for coaches, it's for people who write resumes, it's for, give us the real specifics for those people who are listening and say, oh, okay, that's kind of what I do. Maybe I should look at Career Thought Leaders.
Yeah, it's careers professionals. So they're focused on helping people manage or build their career. And a little bit of that is the leadership development side. coaches, personal branding strategists, resume writers, and we are kind of an umbrella organization. So we serve people at the universities, at the workforce centers, military transition offices, those in independent practice, and those that work within corporations. That's kind of our growing piece right now, is people that work in corporations doing career development there. So if you work and help people manage their careers, job search, advance leadership development, we have a community for you to join and talk to other people about what's going on in this space and how do we be more effective in helping clients manage really what is an uncertain world today in terms of the world of work.
Okay, that's really clear. Thank you for that, because I have to tell you, I was extremely impressed with the conference that you put together. I couldn't and still can't imagine putting on one in another country and all that must go on. Was there anything funny that maybe has happened in putting on conferences?
Oh, you should make a blooper reel. um, I know that I have tripped on stage at least once. Thankfully, I don't know that I've ever fallen down. Um, there's always something that's happening in the background that's funny. Oh, probably one of my funniest is that I was up on stage telling the group that we were going to do a 3-hour tour, and it was a bus tour. It was going to be 3 hours, and everybody in the audience started laughing. And I was like, I don't understand why you're laughing. And tends to be a little bit older group than me. And they said, oh, 3-hour tour. And I was like, I still have no idea what you're talking about. And someone's like, Gilligan's Island. I'm like, oh, sorry, wrong decade. I never watched that show. So I did not mean to offend them, and I don't think I did, but it was one of those times where I was up on stage completely clueless as to what was going on in the audience.
And as always, you probably just floated right on through that without any resilience, right? You had resilience. You know, you said something in our conversation, Marie, I thought was very powerful. You said, I learned from my mom. I am, and that's important. I am, and that's important. What does that mean?
Well, so it's that mix, right, of that you are who you are and you bring value to everything that you do, and that we are always improving, and that's not a bad thing. You don't have to improve, right? That perfectionist piece can say, oh, I need to improve for people to like me or to, be accepted. But that I also always want to improve just to be better at what I do, to deliver more value, but that it doesn't impact my value as a human. And I think that takes a long time for many of us to figure out that we don't have to be perfect to be valued, to be loved, to deserve respect and love, and yet we can continue to thrive and to seek and to drive ourselves forward, even though we know that we have value as in our current state. And there's always some kind of tension there between being happy with who I am and yet wanting that drive to continue to build and grow and seek, to explore, to have adventure, and to also offer more value to the people that I serve.
Well, what's coming to my mind as you're saying that, Marie, is the difference between wanting to improve versus prove. And it's interesting to me in many of the clients that I do executive coaching with, oftentimes, for whatever reason, someone is trying to prove their worth, prove their ability, prove they can do this. And without getting philosophical, there's a difference between having that mindset of, I've got to prove myself versus I want to improve and be the best that I can be. So just thought I'd tag on to that. You like that?
Yeah, that's great. Oh,
You can
what
steal
what
it.
a way to
You
sum
can-
that up.
Okay. You also said, you gave me some really good teachable points of view that we like to always ask our guests to share. And of course, the one we've already talked about, Murphy's Law, I just think that's hilarious. Murphy's Law, if something's going to go wrong, it will, and be prepared. The other one I wanted to ask you about was don't let the goal be the driver. There was a lot about process in that, business acumen. So talk to us about that.
So it's funny that it's become a business acumen point because it actually started related to a much more personal issue. My husband and I were having trouble getting pregnant, and I realized that that goal, I didn't have control over it, right? None of us do. But I had control over the process. So what did I want to do? What was I willing to do? And if you ever know someone in that situation, there's so much misinformation and you should do this or you should do that. Stop eating everything. Don't move. Go on vacation. And so it was like, okay, that's the part of this that I have control over is the process. I don't have control over the goal. And that's when I learned that lesson. And then I said, okay, this probably applies to everything that I do, that if I want to get my business to a certain place, I don't really have control over that. And I probably can't even see what the best outcome is going to look like. But I can set a vision. I can say, these are the things that I'm looking forward to and that I want to accomplish. But then really, I have to be in control over the process. What am I going to do every day to try to achieve those goals? And how am I going to recognize when what I'm doing isn't leading me towards the goal, but also, maybe even more importantly, realize when the universe is offering me something that maybe I couldn't even see was part of the goal. And if our goal is too brick-like, if our goal is this kind of molded brick that's all hard, then we might miss out on opportunities and we might feel kind of weighted down by that goal. Versus, I like to have the analogy of the goal being clay, that you've formed something and you see the vision, but then it's malleable enough that when the vision shifts or when you see a new way that it could look, that you can change that and remold it into something that fits more for where you're going. And the person that I was listening to this webinar, and it was kind of like, you don't know more than the universe. You don't know better than the universe. And yet we connect a lot of our happiness to that goal that maybe isn't even the best goal for us. So it was a kind of mind-changing event for me just to think about it differently.
That's so interesting because goal setting, the reality is we used to have goals for the next 5 years. And then it was, well, what are your goals for the next 3 years? And then not so long ago, it was, what are your goals for the year? Well, you know what? I just ask my clients to tell me their goals for 3 months, knowing that in this crazy changing world, just as you said, it's clay. So I really like that teachable point of view. I like that. Don't let the goal be the driver. I'll remember that one. Derek, if you got that one up, that's a good one. So let's get personal here about these kids that you finally do have and how precious they are. Tell us about the family and how you're keeping the family your number one priority with all these other things going on.
Well, it's so challenging for us moms and dads, especially with young children, isn't it, to balance that being at home when we're at home and being a sole business owner. All of my staff are virtual, so my time I have to really manage myself. And I like to feel like when I am done at the end of the day, it's all about them. And getting on the floor, that's one of the things my mother-in-law said to me, that she wished she'd gotten on the floor more and played with her kids. So I get on the floor and I play with them, and that's their time. And then really focus on doing my work and taking care of my business and myself during, this time, my business time, if you will. And we talk a lot about gratitude. And one of the things I'd read about gratitude that I really love, people say, have a gratitude journal and write 3 things down at the end of the day. And that's a great way to do it. But then I read somewhere that said to have gratitude markers. And so when you're going through your day, have something that you look at that reminds you to have gratitude. And so what I've done is taken what some people might see as causing stress, which are the toys that are around my house. and turn
Yeah.
them into gratitude markers. And I remember that when I see a toy that's in my way, it's a little bit harder when I step on a Lego, but those are my gratitude markers. And I remember to be grateful that not everyone, I still know people, you meet a lot of people that struggle to have kids when you're struggling to have kids. And I still know people that haven't been able to. And what a better way to have gratitude about that every day and to remember to have gratitude about that instead of getting frustrated. So it's a lot of coaching yourself
Yeah.
daily to separate the two and integrate the two so that you're living and working and enjoying all of it as much as possible.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And there's something now we know, even by research, that there's something very powerful if you do just that. If you have your little talks to yourself, I have them to myself all day long, Marie. I don't know about you, but at the beginning of every day, I say to myself what I'm grateful for, and as I put my head on that pillow, I do. And I actually, in working with a client and suggesting that to her, she said, Marie, it was literally a pivot in her whole mindset because she saw a different perspective that came when she did that for a couple of weeks. So that's great. I love that. So your kids are how old? And their
One,
names?
yeah, they're 1 and 3, Cullen and Raylan, little boys, 2 little boys, 1 and 3, and they are busy.
They are big. So's mom. What I remember about being a speaker for you in Spain last year was that you were actually pregnant, very pregnant, with your little one, and you got on the plane right after that conference. You said you were going to China right after that conference. I don't know how you did that, Marie, but you did, didn't you?
It was so much fun. And now my 1-year-old, I'll tell him that he's gone around the world because we went to Madrid and then I flew to Beijing and then flew around the world the way home. But you can't. I guess maybe it goes along to the very beginning of our discussion. I don't want to let those types of things get in my way of having an adventure, doing the things I want to do, and really getting to meet some really interesting people. Beijing was just fascinating. And about 5 years ago, so when I first started doing, maybe six, this personal branding work, I had written a headline, Marie Zimenoff to present in Asia. And I didn't know what that would look like. I didn't know where it would go. But when I got the opportunity to present at a conference in Beijing, even though I was going to be pregnant, it was yes, yes, I will go. And it was an amazing experience.
Well, and if you hadn't gone, you would have missed that. So there again, that's resourcefulness and resilience. Really good. Are there any, let's see, I want to ask you about just, again, back to your calmness. I'm going to rub up against the screen here and see if it'll rub off a little bit. But what about things that bother you in business? Are there any triggers that you're willing to share? Ooh, when someone does this or doesn't do that, is there anything within your staff that you've had to share with them that might not set well?
So I tend to be somewhat fiercely loyal once someone's kind of in my community. And I had invited a speaker to speak at a conference, and they had some really serious personal issues going on, and they came anyways. And they were up on stage and they made a joke that was not really the right joke for the audience. It wasn't
Mm,
rude or derogatory, it just wasn't perhaps the best taste. And I've been there before, right? When you're supposed to be speaking and you've got stuff going on, so your mind isn't really there, you're not maybe controlling your mouth as much
yeah.
as you usually would. And I had someone come in and talk to me after that presentation. They were just rude and mean about this presenter, more so than the remark I felt really called for. And I had to leave the room because I was just so upset. Not necessarily that this person was being rude, but that we just don't give each other any benefit of the doubt. She didn't know what was going on with this person's family, and I couldn't tell her. I shouldn't have to. But just giving each other the courtesy and the kindness to ask what's going on, to think, oh, maybe they didn't really know the audience, whatever it might be. But I hate, I don't want to use the word hate. It's always upsetting to me when people are so harsh about each other. I've sat in conferences where people say, oh, I knew everything that that presenter talked about. Well, that's up to you, right? As an attendee to find that nugget. And yes, we want to give our feedback and our speakers want to be as good as they can be. But just to remain as positive as we can in our feedback so that people can hear it and do something with it, and to realize that everyone always has something going on that we know nothing about, which is one of those cliches. But I saw it that day, and it was really hard to see people treat someone badly when they had such painful things going on in their life and made a point to be there anyways.
Well, Marie, thank you for that wisdom, because on a lot of levels, as a speaker, I often wonder, do the people in the audience know how much time and energy and depth of thought goes into what is being presented? And that goes to then, even in the everyday workplace, give thought to, as you said, people didn't know what was going on in that person's life. And so next time I'll talk for myself too. So, when you tell someone something, you got to look at it in their eyes too, to always think about, well, what was the intent here? Did someone really have bad intentions? And so, yes, I think what you just shared is really a good way of thinking just about anything in your life. You don't know what's going on in someone else's life. And oftentimes, I have personally found out, me included, some pretty bad stuff often is going on, and maybe no one really knows it. So kindness. We need more kindness. I totally agree with that. You know what, Marie? I can see why you are the CEO of this large organization. And I want to thank you for taking the time and being with me and sharing all the things that you have. And I also want people to know how, if they are interested in knowing more about your organization, we're going to put this up on the screen, I hope now, but verbalize it. Where can they find out more about Career Thought Leaders?
Yeah, so it's careerthoughtleaders.com, and we're on LinkedIn. You can connect with us. You can connect with me. Happy to share information with you and build our community and have you as part of our community. And Valerie, would just say, assuming positive intent, assuming that people are trying to do the best they can do, is really the best that we can do. And it's so hard. It seems so simple, but it's so hard to get our minds around judging and assuming, and just, people are doing the best that they can do. And thank you so much for this show and the message that you share, helping people tell their stories and getting the story out there of people doing it right, as you do and have been doing for so long. It's such a great pleasure to be connected to you and to follow your example.
Oh, thank you so much. Mutual Admiration Society. Well, and the reason that you're successful is because of all the things you've talked about. You're real, you're authentic, you're living your values, you're demonstrating integrity, you're doing it right, Marie. And you have how many members now at this juncture?
Well, we aren't a membership-driven organization, so we have members, about 400 of them. Then we have about 1,500 people that hold our certifications, but we specifically don't require membership for our certifications so that they're more accessible, especially to people in universities and workforce centers. And in our community, we probably have about 5,000 that join our community events in some way or connect with us on social media in a meaningful way. So we've got about 5,000, as you said, in 40 countries and growing, trying to help career development be understood and recognized and credible as an industry, and the way that it changes people's lives, and loving what they do every week for maybe 40, hopefully 40, 50, but maybe 80 hours in their week. So thank you again, Valerie.
You're welcome. And to that point, you had, I was told, 1,500 people go through one of your courses, at least one of your courses, and get certified. So do go on to the site, careerthoughtleaders.com, easy to find. And Marie is the kind of person that if you wanted to email her directly, I know she'd answer just like I would. So that's it for today. I want to thank her again for being on the show. And now I want to share with you the Valerieism for today. And here it is. When change happens, it helps to change your mindset, that is. And here's a story about it. Marie shared some things, and other guests have too. I'm going to tell you what happened to me when I first got married. I did not have stability in our marriage for 15 years. And I came from the kind of a background that really needed stability. And so here I married my wonderful husband I'm still married to today. And what did he do? He became a salesperson for IBM. And that meant I've been moved. So for 15 years, I was packing and unpacking and packing and unpacking and packing and unpacking for 15 years. We moved about every 2 years. And we lived in about 6 to 7 different cities. Part of the time, he didn't go to or he went to a city and I stayed home and raised my 3 kids. Now, what I want to say about that was, it was interesting because actually I didn't have a choice, but because I didn't have a choice, I did change my perspective. I just figured, well, what am I going to do about it? This is out of my control. He's going forward in his career. This is all good. And every move, I found myself getting more and more excited about, well, I wonder who I'll find in this city. I wonder who my friends will be. I wonder what new things I'll learn. And sure enough, when you change your mindset, I, in fact, did learn some new things, have friends from all over the country, and it ended up being wonderful. So keep that in mind. And, by the way, don't forget that if something today was impactful, the first 10 people who will send me a note that says, this is what I learned from the podcast today, I will send you an article related to what we talked about, one of 120 articles that I wrote for Southwest Airlines magazine over 10 years. So I've got a lot of these articles. If you're one of 10, you be sure and send that to Valerie at valerieandcompany.com. What did you learn? And I'll send you this article. It was interesting last week when I said this. Guess who was the first one to send me an article? Jeff Sinilli, who is the CEO of Which. And he wrote a quick note and he said, I wonder if I'm the first. So Jeff, if you're listening, yes, you were, and I hope you liked the article. Until next time, you just stay authentic, live your brand, and be real. Talk to you then.
Thanks for listening. To receive Valerie's voice, free monthly leadership tips, and to learn more about her leadership programs and coaching, visit her website, valerieandcompany.com. Next week, we'll be here again to inspire, engage, and equip you with teachable points of view from successful leaders who have been doing it right. Until then, lead authentically.